Welcome to the Curiosity Podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Brown. I explore my curiosity of really weird things, existential things, pop culture stuff, spiritual phenomena, animals, and all the other things with subject matter experts. What isn't there to be curious about? In today's episode, I explore my curiosity with living abroad. I love living in the good old USA. I do. But there are times when I think, should I live somewhere else? Perhaps Paris, London, or Mexico City? And it turns out I'm not the only one thinking about it. Here's what people on social media are saying about living abroad in the comments. To unpack my curiosity with living abroad, I asked Mac Kendema to join this episode because he's doing just that, living abroad. Originally from Minnesota, Mac packed up his things and moved to Asia. I'm going to be mum about what country at the moment because I want you to guess, but for him, it's been quite the ride, especially as a Liberian-American from the Midwest. So let's get into my curiosity. What's up with living abroad, featuring Mac Kendema? All right, so without further ado, I'm going to introduce our guest. His name is Mac Kendema. He's originally from Minneapolis, Minnesota. That is amazing because, as y'all know, I'm from Chicago, so this is whoop whoop. This is definitely a nice Midwest connection. He's a former IT consultant for Turnberry Solutions, former Square Enix community manager, and current owner and JPEN translation lead for a fascinating company called Borderless Translations. And he's joining us because, as I said, he lives abroad. So again, we'll reveal where in a sec. But first, Mac, is there anything you want to add to your bio?
Yeah, I think you did a great job, Jennifer. And just to add to it, I'm now currently starting a video game studio called Borderless Studios. And I'm trying to create games for the culture, by the culture, and making a new game called Clock Out at 2 for microaggressions in the workplace. So stay tuned for that.
Awesome. You told me about this when we talked before. I just want to ask one little question. Do you want to
Yes.
share? Yes. Do you want to share a link to where people can find, this game?
Yeah, I would love to. Do you want me to just say it out loud, or do you want me to?
Yeah, please.
Okay.
It'll be in the show notes
So,
as well.
okay, perfect. So you can find the link on either LinkedIn at Borderless. And so if you go to LinkedIn, you go to Borderless Studios, you'll be able to find the link. Another place you can go to is itch.io, which is a indie game platform where indie game developers can, put up their in development work and share it with the community. Just look up Clock Out at 2 and it'll pop up. But as Jennifer said, the link will be in the bio as well.
Fantastic. We definitely need more video game development representation among our people. So this is super, super exciting. And thank you again for sharing a link with me. So living abroad. Okay. So much has transpired in our country, in America. Mac is from America. As I said, he is, I don't even know. Do y'all call yourselves Minnesotans? Is that right?
Yep. You're absolutely right. Yeah,
So
that's
okay. Mac is a Minnesotan. And, in the US, a lot of Black people have contemplated living abroad because of, some election choices. Some people are not the biggest fans of Trump. Some people are not the biggest fans of Republican states in general or the rhetoric. And so this topic is very much timely right now. It has been for a while, actually. So let me give you a few fun facts about where Mac is living abroad, and then Mac is going to reveal where he lives. So I pulled these up from the internet, trusty old internet, and here are 5 interesting facts. Fun fact number one: over 80% of the country is mountainous.
Hmm.
KFC is a Christmas tradition. These people, the place where he lives, these people have one of the highest life expectancies in the world. There's a rabbit island in this country. And lastly, the oldest company is found in this country. So now, Mac, I don't know if you knew any of those fun facts. Did you know any of those?
I know 4 out of 5 of those. The fifth one, the oldest company, that one I'm curious about.
Okay, very good. I think 4 out of 5 is excellent. So, can you reveal to us where you are living abroad, sir?
All right, drum roll, please. So where I'm at is the nickname is the land of the rising sun, and so I'm here based in Tokyo, Japan.
Hey, I think it's incredible that you live in Japan because I only know Japan as particularly for Black people to be a
Mhm.
place where they live because of the military. I have a dad who lived in Okinawa. I had a brother who lived in
Oh
Okinawa. My
wow.
sister-in-law is married to a military man, and they're moving
Hmm.
to Japan. I forget the city though. Um, and so, are you in the military as well?
No, I am not. I know very often when people see a melanated guy such as myself, their first thought is, "Oh, you're military." I'm like, "No, didn't go that route."
So, what brought you to Japan then?
Well, I think maybe the number one reason that you said was like military. I'm maybe the number two reason, which is the anime, manga, and like the video games.
Awesome. So, going from Minneapolis directly to Japan, or was there
Hmm.
like another pit stop between those two?
So for me, my journey has been a little bit of back and forth, right? Starting from 2013, small visits here and there, getting accustomed to it. And then finally in 2017, then I took the full plunge and moved here fully.
So, it's been 6.5, 7 years, would you
Hmm.
say?
Yep, that's
Okay.
that's correct. It's been a bit.
Okay. So, tell us about your experience. What does it mean to live abroad?
Hmm. For me, living abroad is freedom, so to speak, and really discovering who you are. And for me, I felt like living in the States, it felt like it was very much my life was on a planned course, so to speak. Like, growing up, your parents are like, hey, I need you to be a doctor, or I need you to be this. And then eventually you're like, no, I don't want to do that. I want to be this. I want to do that. But still, you're still very much stuck in the American norm, right? Maybe you start your own business, maybe you just want to get promoted, maybe you just want a couple of side hustles, and that's kind of how we go about our daily lives. But moving abroad, your whole identity kind of comes to question because now you really do have to decide for yourself what, or I guess, what do you want to do and who do you want to be? Because when you come living abroad, you need to have a purpose for being in that country. And if you don't know that purpose, you will not, you probably won't last long.
That's good. So, before you moved to Japan, did you feel like you knew what your purpose was and you were going to fulfill it in Japan, or did that purpose come when you started living in Japan?
I would say both, both. So my original purpose was to come here and break into the video game industry, and I wanted to really thrive here because in Japan, all roads kind of lead back here when it comes to video games. Now, the secondary purpose that I found while being here is for supporting the melanated or the Black community And it's kind of funny how I was able to discover that that motive coming all the way here to Japan.
You know, being in a country where well, this is interesting because I was about to say being in a country where you are the minority. Well, in the US, we're the minority as well. But
Hmm.
I guess you're more of a minority there, right?
Yes.
You're more of a
Hmm.
minority. Like there aren't as many of us. And then you're so layered, and I don't want to take away from that because yes, you are American. You and I are nationally connected. However, my lineage, my ancestral lineage, is more so here in this country than
Hmm.
yours. We were
Yes.
talking before about how your parents are Liberian, right? And then
Hmm.
also you're a Midwesterner, so you are actually a very diverse,
Mm.
black person. I mean, we all are, but there's so much more to you. So when you talk about the melanated or the black community,
Hmm.
tell me about the black communities there, maybe the Liberian communities,
Yes.
the American communities in general that you have
Hmm.
connected with.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Um, just talking about identities, really discovering yourself. Maybe if you're still in America, you might just consider yourself just black, right? And then maybe that's like all you know. And then maybe if someone says, "Hey, are you African?" People are like, "Oh no, I'm not African. I've been here. My family's been here for 100 generations." But when you're abroad, people don't really know all that. People would just be like, "Oh, are you from Africa?" I mean, technically, right? Like, but is your
Yes.
identity in Africa, right? And so, even here, when they say American Africa K, which is like American is like people from America, but they always add Africa K, which is like from Africa or with in relation to Africa, right? So that's that African American. So even here, we're not really considered just American, right? And so that becomes a bit more um, nuanced, right? So there's a lot of different conversations happening. But to go back to your main point, some of the communities that I discovered here was during the time of George Floyd. And from George Floyd, that's when I really was able to connect with a lot of these different communities. So, for example, with the US community, think very much expats, right? People come here, they got money, they want to be able to, transfer here for a work assignment. They just want maybe something new, something to retire. So you get a lot of people who have that almost that privileged mindset compared to the I guess quote unquote the natives here, right? Especially now with the exchange rate being so high that the U.S. dollar can buy you a lot of yen. And so when you interact with those individuals, sometimes you can relate to the fact that I think it's like 98 or 99% Japanese, and the other percentage is like other. So there's definitely a need to fellowship with other like-minded individuals. But as Americans, right, we're like, okay, we're together, we're from the same place. But you also have to remember, right, because of that expat status, that privilege kind of plays into it as well. And so being for me, I came not necessarily the expat route. I came the immigrant route where I'm like, okay, I have enough money to go to school, to try to learn the language and try to like, slowly work my way up. But now with the expats, they're just like, nope, I'm gonna use my money to position myself up here. And some people don't even bother learning the language. Some people just they go stay here 10, 15 years, don't learn the language, and there's a disconnect, so to speak, right, because of that privilege. So that's almost like the American expat side. Now for the Liberian side, there's a few. There's like a U.S. not a U.S. sorry, a Liberian embassy here. So I know some of the people in the embassy because I've been wanting to connect back to Liberia, and I often every year I throw a charity event called Jam for Liberia, where I bring in local Japanese artists to raise money for kids back in Liberia. And so that's kind of like my relationship with the Liberian community here. And then in general, the African and Black community, I'm a part of two organizations. One is called Tokyo Black Professionals, where everyone Black, melanated from Africa, from wherever, we get together and we talk on a professional settings, right? And so what's really nice is that you need help to survive here, without a doubt. If you want to have a business, if you want to be successful, there's just a lot of things you don't know about. And unfortunately, because we're like, I mean, the word out, I don't want to use the word outnumbered, right? But because of the numbers are working against you, right? You don't always know who's on your side, who's not giving you all the necessary information. So it's important to have the people who have pioneered before you, to learn from them, to lean on their knowledge. And yeah, I hope that covers your question.
It does. It does. You gave me really great insight on what it's like to be you in
Hmm.
Japan. Um, wow. I think you said a lot of really incredible things. I want to backtrack a little bit on identity
Hmm.
because it seems like being in Japan, you've leaned more probably into being black than per
Hmm.
se here in America.
Hmm.
Is that correct?
Yeah, I would agree on that.
Okay. I think also it's because it's used the word outnumbered, right? So there
Hmm.
really is an urgency, right? As you said, to fellowship. You're using um, so many incredible words to describe your experience there.
Hmm.
So thank you for that. Um, Immigrant versus expat. Can you explain the difference? Because I think I've been using the word expat incorrectly.
I think we're all use it's at the end of the day, we're all immigrants. So if you but we use the term expat to almost try to place us above immigrants, right? And it's one of those situations where, like, I mean, I guess we're from America, so we're kind of used to it. Yeah? Like when we talk about like undocumented immigrants, right? We're like, oh, they're undocumented immigrants, right? They're like here, but like, we're also, quote unquote immigrants, right? It's like, at what point do we really have the right to say, hey, we stole these people's land, right? Now we're the natives, right? I was like, I don't know, I don't think that's how that works, but um but in
Right.
in Japan, right, it's almost the same way, right? You come in, we think of immigrants as people who are like lower tier, right? People who maybe are not necessarily, they just have a certain status to them, right? But we give ourselves these expats. It's like, oh, no, 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 no. I'm not like those immigrants, right? I'm someone who came here because of work. I'm come here because I know I can contribute to society, or whatever it is. But like, it's almost like that perspective that you come here on on both your legs, right? And maybe an immigrant might come in because they need a better opportunity, right? They're escaping from something. So that might be like the nuance that at least I feel that people have when it comes to immigrants versus expats. And but then that also kind of plays into that privilege of, like, well, some expats will just say, hey, I'm not going to learn your native language, right? I'm here to help you, not vice versa, right? So, you should be happy I'm here. But that's like, maybe that's for another time.
I mean, if we want to get into that, we can. I like that we
Yeah.
have scratched the surface of that, though, because that's
Hmm.
fascinating. And I think I want to go just a little bit deeper. Which one do
Hmm.
you consider yourself?
So I often consider myself. So when people are talking to me, right, if they call me an expat, I'll just say yes. So because they're not wrong, right? But I personally consider myself an immigrant because I feel like I came here for a better opportunity. I came here on a limited budget, and I needed to hustle, right? I needed to go to school to learn the language. I had to ask for help from like everyone I met to just maybe basic groceries, right? I don't know how many times I had to ask some random stranger in the grocery store, be like, is this something I'm allergic to? Is this something I can eat? And then but they're so helpful. Same thing with the doctor's office, right? I had to have my Japanese language teachers come with me very often to help me. And that's something I mean, it's something I wouldn't need to do in the States because I have language proficiency. And so it definitely made me realize that, oh, you need a lot of help when you are brand new in the country, when you don't know the language. And that also made me think about how people who are either illiterate feel like in America, where it's like, yeah, it's a struggle. When you can't read, when you can't write, when you can't communicate, it adds a layer of frustration as well. And so I'm happy I'm able to like articulate myself so well in Japanese now. Of course, there's some areas where even I struggle, but it's definitely something that really awakened in me, and a deeper appreciation of the immigrants who are currently in America who have also made their way. Because I can't even imagine, right? They came in even lower than me, right? Because at least I was an IT consultant beforehand, but for them, they, almost from scratch.
You know what? I think of several things. One is, immigrants who have come to this country, to America, to be specific, to America, and even my people who were forced to come to this country, right? Forced immigration, right?
Mm,
In terms of enslaving people, how we had to learn the language
mm-hmm.
of colonizers. Um, and that we ended up creating, in some kind of ways, newer languages. If you ever went
Yes.
down south to South Carolina, you know about the Gullah and the Geechee.
Mm-hmm.
But then also the way our relationship with English as well has created new words, new
Yes.
phrases. So I love that as an American, as a national American that you are, that you went to a country that isn't necessarily as English language accommodating, I
Mm,
would say, as maybe France is, or maybe even Spain,
mm-hmm.
um, because it takes a lot of humility. I think a lot
Yes.
of our people, Americans, um, are accommodated so much in the world in terms of our
Mm-hmm.
language that if we were to consider a country to live in, we probably wouldn't consider a country like Japan because they don't
Yes.
accommodate. It doesn't seem like they accommodate as much in terms of our language.
Mm-hmm.
So you talked about going to Japan, and again, you're in Tokyo, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. You're in Tokyo and you use two words that seem to be owned by our country, and those two words
Mm,
are better opportunity.
mm,
So we Americans, we like to think, oh, America is where we can get a better opportunity.
mm-hmm.
And you kind of like, wait, the better opportunity was here in Japan. Can you
Yes.
explain what you mean by that? How was it a better opportunity for you?
Yeah. For me specifically, it was about the industry, right? Being from the Midwest, or at least at the time, there was not a lot of video game development studios. The Midwest does have a lot of publishing companies where, for example, you have like Activision, you have Sony, you have Microsoft, and they have publishing divisions where they do like quality assurance. But that's not really making games, right? And even learning how to make games, there's not a big, schools that can teach you video game development. So your choices were either going to, one of the coasts, east or west, and going to those bigger studios. But for me, I don't know, I really like the Midwest. I really like Minnesota, and I just really wanted to find something there to, to, I guess, get my foot in the door for the industry. Luckily, there was a few opportunities. So I took, that one of the publisher jobs as a quality assurance tester to play like video games, to test it, to learn about it. And then later on, I was able to find a short job at a company called Native X that does mobile advertising for video games. And luckily, they were doing partnerships with Japan, with China, with Korea, with the bigger name game studios. So I actually got, a sneak peek of working with those Japanese studios. And from there, they were able to give me like, I guess the full story is I really wanted to study abroad. But at the time, right, this is like the last year of university, is that I had already completed my credits. And so they were like, oh, no, 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 you already completed your credits, which means you're not eligible for financial aid. And because I was in financial aid, right, I didn't have the money, right? My parents didn't have the money. And so I was kind of left, I'm like, oh, okay, I guess I did it too late, right? So I graduated. At the time, I didn't have any future prospects. And I was just kind of like really devastated because I was like, man, I wish I had did this earlier. But Native X, I had been actually following this company because they had been trying to do video game development beforehand. I've been following them for a few years. I even met the CEO, and this time around, they had a job for a business development manager or a business development like kind of like internship. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna apply. This is perfect. I know the CEO, I know the company very well, and of course, I procrastinated. And then one day, I checked it again, and the job was gone. And so I panicked. I
Oh,
panicked, and I emailed the CEO. I was like, hey, I've been following you guys for so long. I saw this opportunity, but it's gone now. Is there any way you can I guess help me out or like have a conversation. And the CEO, his name is Rob, and he saw the email. He's like, "Oh yeah, cool. Yeah, I'm glad you reached out. Let's set up an interview." So we set up an interview. He actually made another internship position for me, and then I moved to a place called Sartell, and in Sartell, it's about 3 hours away from like not 3 hours, like 2 hours away from Minneapolis. And he set me up with like an apartment, and I moved there for 3 months for the internship. And then when the internship was about to end, that's when I decided to, make my move because I still wanted to travel abroad. So I knew they wanted to do more business development in Japan specifically. And so I said, hey, Rob, is it possible for me to go to Japan and, I pay for my living expenses, but I want to help you make some business in Japan. And I said, but is it possible for you to pay for my airfare to help me get there, right? And he thought about it. He thought about it. He was like, all right, let's go. And so he ended up paying for my airfare, gave me like a part-time job. And while I was there in Japan for about 3 months, that's what allowed me to have that opportunity to travel, right? And so I'm like, you have to take risk, right? You have to understand where opportunity is, right? Otherwise, you're not going to be able to capitalize on it. So that's I know that's a very roundabout way about better opportunity, but for me, that was the better opportunity. So being able to be in Japan, but also still being connected to Minnesota, that was my ideal dream, and that's something I still continue today.
that's incredible. I am impressed by your um what is it? Just your initiative. You realized you were procrastinating on the opportunity. You saw that the position had been close, for most people, they'd be like, oh, darn, and then move
Mm.
on. You decided to do something different. You emailed the CEO. That's bold, right? And then here we are. I mean, that's basically what led you to where you are now, right?
Yes.
Which is
Hmm.
incredible. So at this point, now you're in the country. Can you give me the year?
The year, like the current year, or the how many years I've been here?
Oh, the year where you moved to Japan after, I guess, the company
Oh,
paid for your airfare. What year is that?
yeah. So that year, that was in 2013. So it was
Okay,
from
great.
October to December for 3 months, and then I came back.
Great. So you're in Japan in 2013.
Hmm.
Tell us about your journey with the language because I assume it starts there, right? In 2013.
Yes. Hmm.
Okay. Tell us about that because I would love to know about it.
Yeah, so while I was there, I was also enrolled in language school. And so what I would do is that I would do language school in the morning, and then this was like Monday through Friday, 4 hours every day, straight Japanese. And then in the evenings, I would go to business networking events for the company. And learning the language there, it was a lot of fun actually. And so for me, I mean, of course, I was just like geeking out, right? I was just like, oh, I'm in Japan. I saw this place in an anime. I saw this place in a manga. I saw this place in a video game. So I was very like excited to try different things. And then in school, that added another layer because I was surrounded by other foreign nationals, right? So people from Korea, people from China, people from Sweden, people from all over who wanted to come and learn Japanese. And from that experience, it was fun because I got to learn a lot about the different cultures because when you're just learning a new language, right, you have to try your best to get your point across using your basic vocabulary, right? And because of that, people are very honest, and I think I like that because now I'm learning a lot about this country that normally I would not have gotten this kind of insider information, and also vice versa, right? And then one thing I ended up realizing is that I have to, like, you're the representative, right? So whatever you say at that point becomes truth. And that's a little scary to be honest, because then now I'm like, okay, like beforehand, maybe in America I might say something and be like, okay, but look it up. But if I say it in Japan, I can't, they're not gonna look it up. They're just gonna be like, yeah, he knows what he's talking about. I'm like, no, 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 I don't. Let me let me go do some research first. And I think that's so important to be able to say, to have that awareness to say, hey, I'm not 100% sure about this, but these are either my personal thoughts, or please allow me to do a bit more research on this so I can get back to you. Because even as an American, that doesn't mean I know everything about America.
I love that. Your accent. What have people said about your accent? Does it matter?
Yeah. So that's kind of the funny thing, right? It's like which accent, right? So if I'm in America, people might say, "Oh, I hear that Midwest accent," right? I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah." And then, but I'm also from like born in Jersey, right? So every so often, I'll like people are like, "Oh, where where are you from?" Right? I'm like, oh, like I'm originally from like Jersey, and but it's very much vocabulary based, right? At least in the States for me. So depending on what words I'm using, I might have like a Jersey accent, I might have a Minnesota accent, might also have a Liberian accent because those are the words I learned from those specific areas, right? And so that's what's that is attached to. Now in Japan, like when you say accent, right? People are like, "Oh yeah, you're from America." Because we all have we all have that shared like kind of American accent when it comes to Japanese. Yeah.
So when you're speaking Japanese, I'm just curious what accent comes out. Is it the sort of general American accent? Is it a Minnesotan accent? Is it a Jersey accent? A
Mhm.
Liberian accent? Which one do you think you sort of have? Or do you think you have a Japanese accent?
It will be I it's definitely heavy on the American side, and then it leans toward like native. So it'll depend. So there are certain syllables in the Japanese language that's just tough for me, and so I do default a lot to the American accent. So, for example, there's like da di do de do, which is like just like a couple of syllables. But that's in America, right? We have like our R's and then we have L's, and they're very distinct. But in Japan, they're mixed. And so for me, when I'm speaking, you probably hear a more because it's written like as an R, but it's not pronounced as an R necessarily. It's like mixed. But because my
Mm.
brain is like, oh, that's an R, you'll hear more of a an R from me, which makes it more like an American accent. If that makes sense.
It totally makes sense. I speak Spanish. So
Mm-hmm.
when I think about actually really for Spanish speakers, I think about their difficulty in saying certain sounds. Like J, unless you're like Argentinian,
Mm-hmm.
normally the J sound is really difficult. Or CH, like when we say in English chef,
Mm-hmm.
Spanish speakers will say chef instead of a
Ah.
softer CH.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I totally understand where you're coming from because it's like, as children, I mean, we're basically molding our tongues to speak in a certain way and to also identify certain letters with certain sounds. And so, with you
Mm-hmm.
learning a another language
Mm-hmm.
later in life, it can be very difficult not only for your mouth but also your eye to identify
Yes.
a character, because y'all
Mm-hmm.
Japanese is not the alphabet, right? I don't know what that's called,
Correct.
but you're identifying a character with a certain sound. So I totally
Yes.
get it. So I'm going to put you on the spot right now because I want to see if my little mouth can move in, I don't know, the Japanese way. So can you
Mm-hmm.
just give me a word and I just want to see if I can pronounce it? Maybe something
Yeah.
you think might be difficult because I'm an American.
Oh, you want something difficult?
Okay, maybe not
Okay.
difficult, like medium difficult, medium difficult, not difficult, medium difficult.
Okay. So I'll give you a phrase, and then we're basically just gonna introduce ourselves. So we're just gonna say, my name is such and such. Nice to meet you. Okay.
Oh God.
All right. So we're ready.
Okay, let's do it.
So watashi wa, and then say your name, des, and then you try.
Okay, one more time, Mac.
Ready? Watashi wa, and then your name, and then des.
Watashi wa Jennifer des.
Ooh, perfect. That's perfect. And then you say yoroshiku onegai shimasu. Okay, ready? Yoroshiku
Yoroshiku
onegai shimasu.
onogai shimasu.
Close. Onegai shimasu.
Onegai shimasu.
Yes, and that means like nice to meet you. So watashi wa Mac desu. Uh, my name is Mac, or I'm
Mm,
Mac. And then yoroshiku onegai shimasu is nice to meet you. So good job.
that was fun. Thank you, Mac. That was fun. Oh my gosh.
No
I was
problem.
literally looking at your mouth like I'm just repeating it.
Oh, I know.
But I
I
wasn't
like.
comprehending. Like I was just, yeah, I was like, yeah, I was looking at all the things. Like just repeat what he's saying, replicate it.
Yeah,
That
yeah, yeah,
was very
exactly.
cool.
Yeah. I do that a
Oh my
lot when
gosh.
so right now I do like English teaching, right? And so that's one of the like careers like a lot of like English speakers come to do in Japan because it's easy to do. And so for me, I've been doing that for almost as long as I've been here, and I've gotten really good at teaching English to all ages. And no matter what, the most important thing is that pronunciation, right? To get you as close as possible to the native language, so that when you do speak, people understand you, right? People who are used to English, they'll be like, oh, I know what she's trying to say in Japanese. But for those people who have no exposure to English, you have to say correctly, or otherwise they're going to be lost. And so when I speak to my students, I often, even I say it at native speed, and I know they can't like understand me because I do it on purpose. They're like, what? But then
That's mean.
like what? But I do that because I want them to also get used to native speed, but also to get used to asking me, "Hey, can you please say that one more time?" Or "Hey, can you please like slow down?" Because sometimes students will just sit there. They're just even if they don't, they just sit there and be like, "Mm-hmm, mm-hmm." I'm like, "Did you understand anything?" And they're like, "Mm." So it's important to to really get them involved. And so one of the things I often do is, phonics, right? And so phonics is so important because even if they can't necessarily understand what I'm saying, when I break it down for them syllable by syllable, it becomes a whole much easier for them to understand. But so yeah, so as you can see, that's why I use that technique with you because I'm just like, okay, even if I just say it, you're gonna be like, huh, what? But at least with my mouth, you'll be able to understand it.
I might have to hire you to be my Japanese teacher or something because you're phenomenal. Phenomenal. Um, okay, switching gears because we have been having a lot of fun actually talking about this.
Hmm.
We're gonna go to maybe a darker side of
Okay.
living abroad, particularly in Japan. All of us black people always want to know, how is the racism set up
Mm.
everywhere else?
How's
And
the
it's never a
racism?
question of, is there racism? The question is,
Mm.
how is it set up? Okay.
Hmm.
So before I actually finish that question, I want to introduce something to you.
Mm.
I watched this movie called Origin. Have you heard of it or seen it?
Origin. Tell me about
Yeah,
it.
sure. So it was directed by Ava DuVernay. Um,
Mm.
It's a film based on a book called
Mm.
Caste: The Origin of Our Discontents by Isabel Wilkerson. Isabel is a Pulitzer Prize winning author. And so DuVernay decided to do a narrative nonfiction about how Wilkerson proved her thesis of this book.
Mhm.
And the thesis was that although here in America, um, sort of the haves and have nots are separated by racism,
Mhm.
in fact, she says, the difference between the haves and have nots are necessarily about racism as much as it is about caste.
Mm.
And I'm sure you've heard that word caste before. A lot of times we use it in
Yes.
terms of the nation of India, right?
Mhm.
Um, so after I watched that movie, and I'll definitely get to, the question I really want to pose to you. After I watched
Mhm.
that movie, I thought to myself, um, caste for me is like an umbrella and
Mm.
racism falls under it. But
Mhm.
in the movie, she interweaves the caste systems of America,
Yes.
Nazi Germany, and India.
Mm.
And so again, she comes to the conclusion that it's not always about racism, that it's about
Mhm.
caste. So maybe my question to you really is, how is the caste system set up
Mhm.
in Japan? And how do you, as really a privileged American,
Mm.
fall into that?
Yeah. That's a great question. That's also a very complex question. So I'll try my best to break it down. And so, as you said, being black, being melanated, right? We don't ask, is there racism in this place? We say, what kind of racism do they have, right? So we're already under assumption that there's going to be, some BS. so, um, so when it comes to, I guess we can talk about like American racism a little, where, with American racism, typically it's, not just, maybe people's image might be black and then white, and that's where the main contention is, right? And then because of the system in place that's created by, I guess either white people, white government, right? I guess depends what's the better word to use, but there's this systemic racism in place that hinders, um, black people at almost every turn, right? So that's kind of the racism that we're used to. And now for Japan, it's a little bit more nuanced for us, right? In a sense that, sometimes, even though if we get treated and it feels discriminatory, it may not be because of the same kind of racism, the same kind of system in place as in America, right? So think of as for America, think of it as like, if you get hit, it's because there's a bullseye on your back. If you get hit in Japan, I think of it as like you got hit by a shotgun pellet. Like it's just they weren't aiming for you. You just kind of got caught in the crossfire. And so one layer I'll talk about is skin color, right? So in Japan, skin color is very much tied to wealth status, right? The lighter your skin, the more wealthy you are, right? The less you are, the more lower status you have. And this is based on way before they met black people, right? Way before they met any like Africans. And because in the caste system, the people who were the lowest were like the farmers, right? So if you're working, you're toiling away on the farm, you get darker skin. Now, if you're like an aristocrat, a samurai, you're not outdoors as much, right? You're seen indoors, and that's seen as a status symbol. So that's one layer, right? So it's not meant for us. That caste system's not meant for us, but because we get introduced to it, we get hit by it, right? We get astray, so to speak, right? Another layer is that based on our nationality, right? Even though that caste system in place, if someone looks at us and they say, "Oh, where are you from?" and you say America, they'll be like, "Oh," their whole perspective changes because for them, America equals wealth, America equals power, and so that status almost, I guess, overrides the previous like caste, their own internal caste system, because that's how favorably they look at America. I mean, it depends on the Japanese person, but this is just like the general perspectives. Now, if you said, right, that, oh, I'm from Africa, right, or some other like African, nation, right, then all of a sudden, then you get double hit, right? You're like, okay, in their image, Africa or people, those African nations are considered lower, and because they're lower, then those expectations you're gonna get hit by that, and then you're also gonna get hit by the full effect of their caste system because they're like, okay, now there's a match, right? And so I've seen it where because I'm American, I get treated way better compared to my African brother or sister who's born in that country, right? And so that's like one level of like colorism or the caste system here in Japan. Um, Even within Japan, there's if we're talking about like racism, right? For us, we're not really. I don't want to say we're not affected by it, but it's like Japanese beef is not with black people, to say the least. It's with Koreans and Chinese. So you'll often see that there's a lot of tension from between these groups. And because, of course, the Koreans and Chinese are in the minority, right, you'll often see how white people treat us, how Japanese treat, the Korean and Chinese, right? So we often, I shouldn't say we often, but like we kind of joke about it. Like Japanese people are like the white people of Asia. And if you look at history, right, just based on what they did in China, what they did in Korea. It's a lot. It's okay to to say, and I'm only saying this as a way for you to understand the nuance of the cultural relationships that are happening. So if you see, so it might not be the norm per se, or I shouldn't say that. I would say that it's more like how, like, if someone was to see America, they might think, oh, everyone has a friend of a different race. This is just amazing. Like, we're all like together, things like that. But it's the same thing with Japan, right? You see, oh, it's a perfect place. Everyone's so polite, everyone's so nice. But when you start to rip back or peel back the layers, then you start to see, like, oh, okay, like, oh, they're not so friendly to each other, right? Oh, maybe what you thought was friendliness from an American point of view or your own country's point of view is actually very different than how Japanese people do it, right? So I think those are some like examples of at least the brand of like racism or the caste system in Japan compared to America.
You broke that down really well. Your analogies were spot on because I get it completely. I attended a Korean founded church for a while in Los Angeles
Hmm.
for 5.5 years. And so I was taught some of the horrific history between Koreans and Japanese. I had no idea of how, contentious that relationship
Hmm.
was and is. So when you talked about, them Japanese being the white people, of Japan, I totally got it. Totally
Hmm.
flashed back to my little history lessons, particularly between Japan and Korea. So thank you for that breakdown. This has been an incredible conversation. We are going to wrap it up. I really don't want to wrap it up. But I am going to figure out really what my last question should be because I have so many. Actually, I'm just going to give it over to you really. Is there anything you want to add?
Let's see. So one thing I'll say is don't be afraid of the unknown. I think um, more than the actual thing is the fear that prevents us from doing things. And I would want you guys to understand that just come here to explore. If you come to Japan, please, my socials will be on the bio. Please reach out to me. I'm happy to give you a tour. Of course, pay for my lunch. Yeah, help me out.
I know
And
that's right. You better.
and I'll help you with some interpreting and just like give you some of the pro tips of being here, right? Because I think once you have someone on the ground with you, it makes it that much easier, right? It eases your anxiety, it eases everything about like the process of being in that country. And so I do want you guys to explore, to enjoy your opportunity of being outside of America because for me, James Baldwin, he's someone that I really like. I really like. I like his thought process, his philosophy, and for him, he became more American by leaving America and going to Paris and kind of discovering how they treated him versus America. And he said, because he loves America so much, he has a right to critique it, right? And so I thought to myself, wow, like being in Japan, I was really able to discover my Americanness, my blackness, and really centering myself on that so that I could survive and thrive here in Japan, but also gaining new abilities, new insights on helping those who who still remain in America. So I encourage you guys to travel, to reach out. There's probably like Facebook groups. There's other groups where you can say Black in Japan or Black in Korea, or and reach out to those groups if you're feeling like anxious. And there, I think most people would be happy to just be like, yeah, this is kind of how it is here, but it's not that bad. Yeah.
Thank you so much to our guests for joining me, and thank you for listening. This episode was edited by Adonis Bakaj, hosted and executive produced by me, Jennifer Brown, produced by Latrice Love, and distributed by Black Owned Productions. I hope you'll join me again on another episode. The Curiosity Podcast is a safe space to not only explore my curiosity of all the things, but yours as well. And together, we get to dig a little deeper as to why that curiosity exists in the first place.